if you don't mind, I'd like to shift gears real quick because I didn't know Julie's background, and I'm fascinated by her growing up in you said Malaysia?
Indonesia.
Indonesia, as a missionary child. I'm just kind of fascinated. Could you just share maybe a little bit about what was that like? I mean, that's unique experience that not many people would understand.
Well, so I went there as a very, very young kid, young, and with my parents, and at the time, two brothers. And as a kid there, um, kids are so resilient, and it was so easy for me to assimilate into where we were. And my brothers and we learned the language. I mean, we were playing with the kids and talking quickly.
Right.
And it took my parents at least a year or more to learn, at least to be able to dialogue. It was kind of funny. And then, so we were one of the first missionaries at the time that we came, went over there. Indonesia, the mission was, they were having sort of a revival. And so they started doing things totally different. Before, missionaries lived in compounds for the most part. So we were some of the first missionaries to actually go into a village and assimilate. And Indonesia had rules and regulations that said that you couldn't proselyte, so you couldn't go in and witness. So you just had to go and live, and they would ask questions, and you would answer questions, and churches were built. By the time we left, by the time my parents actually left, because I'd already come back to America to go to school, there were, I think, 5 churches around that had been started by my parents. But we just lived in this little village, and to me, they were my people, right? I never,
Yeah,
and it
because
wasn't
culturally, that's what you knew.
culturally, yeah, I spoke Indonesian perfectly. Culturally, I had Indonesian friends, and until I came back to America, that to me was culture shock.
How old were you when you came back?
18.
Oh, wow. So
When I came
really,
back for good, yeah.
I mean, you were an adult. So, I mean, your entire childhood, I mean, maybe, how old were you when you went? You said,
I was 9.
yeah. So 9 years. I mean, and those are formative years.
They are. And back then, there wasn't the internet. This was, back in the late 60s, 70s, there wasn't the internet. There was only snail mail. So it would take, to get letters from the States, it would take a month, and then a month to get, any replies back. And so it was really hard and very expensive to do a phone call. So literally, and we lived, in this little village. So so we were really cut off. We only saw other missionaries maybe 3 times a year. And so, we just, in our home, we basically spoke mixed Indonesian and English, because there were just so many Indonesian words that really expressed to us what we were trying to talk about more than English did.
She still speaks Indonesian.
I was just going to ask that. How is your Indonesian, and do you still have people in the Dallas area that you Indonesian that you're friendly with or socialize with?
Not really. I mean, we in Dallas there are a pocket of Indonesians, but it's not really the most asked for language. I'm rusty, of course. We, sometimes speak it, when the family gets together, and of course, we always have Indonesian food. And
she knows a few words that she can't say here that are only used for me.
But
not really.
But I think excuse me, I think the thing that has really helped to probably, as a chaplain, is that in Indonesia, it was one of the most largest Muslim nation in the world. And so my friends, one of my best friends was actually, she was a teacher in the Muslim school. So she taught me the tenets of Islam, and I would teach her about Christianity. So one of the things I learned early on was the exposure of all the different religions, Buddhism, Islam. And so I studied these different religions. How that makes me a better chaplain is that I'm familiar with people from other cultures. I mean, essentially, I grew up, I have a different worldview than so many other people. And in the community that we live, it's very diverse. And we have people from all over the world that live here. And so I think it's made me a lot more compassionate and empathetic, and I think it's helped to make me maybe the kind of a better chaplain, or the kind of chaplain that I am. I think it's given me a different perspective. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Richard, you'll have to have her parents live down the road here.
Oh.
You'll have to have them on sometime. You'll have to bring them on, let them talk about. There's a shortage of missionaries these days, and a lot of boards are having to pull back because of finances. But you ought to have them on sometime, let them talk about their experience.
I would
encourage others to go the mission field.
Love that. Yeah, I was thinking, along with what you were saying, Julie, that living abroad, in addition to the things that you mentioned, I think it also probably gave you a good sense of patience, because, when you're evangelizing overseas, you learn that it's not a quick thing that happens. It's a patient, persistent, thing that takes, relationships too, which is part of your skills as a chaplain, is building that rapport, and the fruits come not just by throwing the Bible at people, but by building a relationship and having that empathy that you mentioned, and sharing of cultures, and yeah, I'm sorry I got off track, but
that's all right. I'm used to being on programs with it where nobody's interested in what I'm doing. That's okay, Richard. I should say I've been there twice, and I'm going to say this and shut up, but you don't go to Indonesia and hold a revival meeting and give an invitation.
Yeah.
Right.
That's an American thing. You have to develop a relationship. And in America, we just want to preach at folks.
Right.
And she's good at developing relationships.
Right.
I mean, you may go a year without ever preaching. I mean, she's been in the car with cops who said, "I'm an atheist." Oh, okay.
Right.
I wasn't going to ask you, but that's interesting.
Right.
But she developed that relationship, and after a while, they might bring up God that they didn't believe in. So it's hard. That's a challenge for religious people to not be too religious.
So a funny story, of course, Indonesia back at that time was like living in the mid 1800s, because of the technology, everything wasn't there. Roads were bad. So electricity was iffy. We had it, sometimes of the year, sometimes we didn't. Running water. So I learned how to mitigate all those challenges. But one of the things about witnessing and things and developing relationships. So my dad, if you would have to, he's one of these. He's a very quiet man. But he was able to really develop great relationships because, like you said, he's really patient. He's a really patient guy. So when we went and we lived in this community, my father really assimilated. He learned, not only did he learn Javanese, Indonesian, he learned Javanese, which is the language of the island that I lived in. It was a really difficult language. My brothers and I could only speak the lower level, but my father had learned to speak it more than we did as children. So, but I remember at one time, a missionary from America came into the town, the village that we lived. It was a town village, and they started living there. And the elders of the village came and talked to my dad and said, if you don't go and talk to this man, he says, Carl, Miss Papa Vendetta Lee, that's Pastor Lee. We've known you here. You've lived among us. You're part of who we are. You're part of us. And we love you, your family. We appreciate you. But these people, if you don't go and talk to them, they're going to be dead soon. So they eventually moved off. But what they did is they weren't coming in and building relationships and just, letting God do what God does. Right. And they came in and were doing, the way most people in America build churches, and it didn't work there. But it doesn't work in police departments or any other places too that are more difficult. And so you're right about the patience. The patience is that a lot of times we don't even see the work that we've actually done, and that's okay. We just have to trust it to God.
Right.
And it could be, you might see maybe one little glimmer of, wow, God, you're really doing something here. And case in point, I've been there for like 5 years, and I'm just sowing seeds. And so I recently, this past year, developed a Zoom Bible study. And in some people's lives, I'm seeing God just do these amazing things. We only have like a handful coming, but it's amazing that I'm looking at these people, and it's not necessarily because of what I've done, because it's really not. It's really what God is doing in that department. And it's just a little bit by a little bit. But I'm looking at these guys. Last night we had a prayer meeting. Afterwards, we prayed, and I looked at their faces, and I went, God, look at what you're doing here. It's like you're working, and I'm able, and I get to watch it, right? I get to be a spectator, but also, I get to participate in what you're doing too. And it's such an honor and a privilege.
Well, I don't. I'm not even allowed to go to the Bible study.
But in a way of encouragement to you, Julie, and to use your own words, sometimes we don't see the fruit. So you may see only a handful of people that are putting their face forward for this, but as we know, throughout history, it's people that are observing the changes in others that they slowly start to open their minds up to things. And you don't know, there might be a domino effect, for each one of these new faces that have, showed an interest, and then their behavior and their outlook changes. It affects their family, it affects their friends, it affects, so your fruit is going to be, or your fertilizer will be bearing fruit for a lot longer than you may know. And
that's the first time she's ever been told that, Richard. That's a good word.
So
we're going to keep on fertilizing here, brother.
Keep fertilizing.